A growing number of Senate Republicans are saying that President-elect Joe Biden should receive classified intelligence briefings and other support as part of the presidential transition process. At the same time, many of those Republicans are largely not acknowledging that Mr. Biden is the winner of the election. CBS News has learned that President Trump is openly discussing, in the meantime, a run for the White House in 2024, even though he has given no indication of conceding the 2020 election. CBS News White House correspondent Ben Tracy has the latest.
CBS News has learned President Trump has told advisors he may run again in 2024, even while he refuses to concede, blocking the transition to President-elect Joe Biden. But the president's firewall of Republican support is starting to crack.
We need to consider the former vice president as the president-elect. Joe Biden is the president-elect.
Several Republican senators, including Ted Cruz, now say Biden should have access to the presidential daily intelligence briefings, something the White House has not provided.
For the sake of protecting the country, you want whoever is going to assume that office to be aware of the significant threats, because the first responsibility of any president is to keep the American people safe.
The Trump campaign continues to file legal challenges, even as senior advisors tell CBS News there's no viable path to overturning the election results. Sources say President Trump knows this, but likes to be seen as a fighter. Democrats accuse Republicans of knowingly supporting President Trump's false narrative.
Congressional Republicans are deliberately casting doubt on our elections for no other reason but fear of Donald Trump.
Diagnosed with COVID yesterday. Self-isolating here at home.
CBS News has confirmed Corey Lewandowski, a top campaign advisor involved in the legal fight, now has coronavirus, one of at least 5 cases among those who attended a packed election night party inside the White House.
I don't know what the hell happened to Fox, huh?
And tonight, President Trump targeting Fox News, tweeting and retweeting a barrage of attacks on the network, still angry that Fox called Arizona for Biden on election night. A new report says President Trump wants to start his own digital media company to clobber Fox News after he leaves office.
Ben Tracy's at the White House, and he joins me now, as well as CBS News political correspondent Keefe. Good to have both of you with me tonight. Ben, I'm going to start with you. You mentioned in your piece that the president's senior advisors admit it would be nearly impossible for Mr. Trump to overturn the election. So I think everybody's wondering, what is the point of dragging out these challenges, and what is President Trump's next move?
Yeah, that's a good question, because this sort of thing does not come free. If you're going to have lawyers in these states filing lawsuits, that's something you have to pay for. But we've been given a couple of different explanations. The one in the immediate aftermath of the election was that this is a way for the president not to have to admit defeat right away. We know President Trump does not like to think of himself as somebody who has lost a race. He said as much when he went to his campaign headquarters on Election Day, saying that he doesn't want to lose this. Losing is hard for him. But the other thing we're being told is that by continuing this fight, it keeps his base riled up. And they think that could be useful for a couple of things. One, those 2 runoff elections in Georgia that will determine the control of the U.S. Senate. They think it could be helpful to make sure that the president's voters get out there and that they vote. And if they're upset about the outcome of this election, that might be a motivating factor. The other thing is they're raising a lot of money. They keep sending out these solicitations to their donors saying, donate to our legal fund. And when you read the small print, that's also money that could be used to retire Trump campaign debt, and we assume that the campaign went into Election Day with some sizable debt based on what they were spending and what they were bringing in.
Yeah, it's interesting, as you mentioned that, Ben, talking about the Georgia Senate race. That's not supposed to happen until January. So is there really any sense within the White House that the president will eventually begin to face pressure from congressional Republicans to concede? And is that likely not going to come until Georgia is decided?
Yeah, you're starting to see even some of that today, where you had some Senate Republicans coming out and say, the president-elect should be getting these daily intelligence briefings. That's some acknowledgement, perhaps, that they think Joe Biden has won this without actually saying it, or saying that President Trump has lost. But, as these states continue to certify their results, and that will start to happen in the next couple of weeks, it becomes harder and harder for Republicans, especially on Capitol Hill, to simply deny the reality of this. But we're told by sources close to President Trump that he may never concede this, that this is something he may just say, this was rigged, you can't trust the outcome of this, even as he leaves office.
Okay, Ed, I'm going to bring you into this conversation because we all have discussed ad nauseum that President Trump does not need to concede for our democracy to continue to go on. But if that happens, what is that going to mean for all those people who did vote in favor of the president and Biden's ability to govern when he is president and no longer president-elect? We do know he's named Ron Klain as his White House chief of staff. It looks like Biden is moving forward as though everything is happening normally, but in many other ways, this isn't really normal, is it?
It sure isn't, Lana, and good evening from a chilly Rehoboth Beach. The former vice president, the president-elect, owns a beach home here, and for some reason enjoys being here when it's 50 and breezy, so here we are as well. When it comes, though, to that question of what to do about the president's supporters who may, like him, not believe that he actually lost, it is part of why so many people in Washington, so many people across the country and around the world really are concerned about what's going on right now, because it not only potentially undermines the Biden administration, it very well undermines the foundations of American democracy and the ability for people to have faith in that it will have happened, that there will have been a peaceful and fair and unvarnished election, and not one that might have been tainted with. And the longer the president goes along saying, or not saying anything really in that regard, the longer there is a likelihood that many of his supporters, not all of them, but many of his most diehard supporters, are going to always allow that doubt to be sowed in their mind that perhaps something went wrong. And we should point out that today, Homeland Security officials just a little while ago said that by their measure, this was the most secure election in U.S. history. So there should be no question that there was concern about foreign interference or other meddling by some non-state actor somehow getting involved in the results. There hasn't been. And remember, we say this ad nauseum, but it's worth saying it again. There have been no reports of widespread fraud or tampering, either with the ballot machines or with the results or with the ongoing counts in these various states. Regardless, as you point out, there are going to be people who feel, maybe just for a little while, maybe forever, that something went wrong here and that President Trump should have been reelected.
And I want to follow up, though, on another point. I mentioned Klain being named as the White House chief of staff. Are you learning anything else about who Biden is intending to put in any of these top positions, as he is clearly moving forward with his transition, even without the formal support or endorsement of the Trump administration?
Sure, one down and only about 4,000 to go across the federal government that the president gets to select. So, he's starting out well. The next batch that we are keeping an eye out for are those that would advise him on foreign policy matters and people who might fill positions like National Security Advisor or Secretary of State. Three big names to watch: Tony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, and Susan Rice. All three worked with him during his campaign. All three worked alongside him in the Obama White House. All three expected to get some kind of a role, some combination of working alongside him in the West Wing and possibly a position at the State Department or elsewhere. Over at the Pentagon, the name that gets mentioned as a possible defense secretary is Michelle Flournoy. She held a defense position during the Obama years and, if confirmed, would be the first woman to serve as defense secretary. So those are one group of people we're keeping an eye out for, who he picks for those roles. We're also told to expect that he'll have several senior advisor types that work alongside him in the West Wing. They could include some of the people who worked on his campaign, like Steve Ricchetti and Bruce Reed, two longtime aides to him, his communications director at the campaign level, Kate Bedingfield. Others that get mentioned are people like Louisiana Congressman Cedric Richmond. Some thought he might be a good chief of staff candidate. Obviously, he didn't get that job, but there might be something else for him. And remember one thing to keep in mind as you watch these appointments happen. He has committed to making sure that the Biden administration reflects the diversity of the country. That means not only gender diversity, but racial diversity, maybe even sexual preference and geography, and maybe even a few Republicans as well. All of that is a serious consideration as he starts to fill out his team.
All right. With the little bit of time I have left, I want to talk about a coronavirus stimulus relief package. Ben, Democrats on Capitol Hill say that we have to do this now as cases are surging nationwide. Senate Majority Leader, though, Mitch McConnell says Republicans aren't willing to meet the number that Democrats have put forward. Where does the White House stand on all of this, and where does the Biden administration start to play into this?
Well, this is something that President Trump talked and tweeted about a lot before the election, but we have heard absolutely nothing about it from him since the election. We did ask the White House tonight where they stand on this. They say that they support the targeted approach that Senator McConnell wants. There's still a big gulf on Capitol Hill. You have the Democrats in the House, led by Nancy Pelosi, saying that they want something that's north of $2 trillion. You have Mitch McConnell and his folks in the Senate saying that's just a non-starter for us. The White House had been all over the map. The president saying at one point that he wanted something even bigger than what the Democrats wanted, and now they're back to this smaller approach that McConnell favors because, frankly, that's what they have to support if that's what can actually get done. The two negotiators here for the White House, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, only one of them still on the job right now because the Chief of Staff is at home with coronavirus. Secretary Mnuchin did meet with the president in the Oval Office today, but the White House won't yet say if they talked about a coronavirus stimulus bill.
All right, Ben Tracy at Keefe, thank you.